Today's guest is the creator of Independent Speculator. It's one of the best newsletters out there to make sense of this very crazy time that we find ourselves in because for so long they talked about how inflation was really more of a conspiracy theory. It was transitory. Not so transitory anymore. And if you go out and buy just about anything, you'll see not only is it not transitory, it's even bigger than the 7% that the Federal Reserve is saying. And we need to be prepared for it. So today we're going to talk about how to make sense of it, how it affects you as an individual, and what you can do about it. Because all throughout human history, when these big cycles of inflation occur, if you don't understand what's happening and how to prepare, you can really get left behind in a major way. And we don't want that to happen. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So make sure you smash the like button on this video right over there, right over there. Send it out into the YouTube universe. Subscribe and bell notification to get notified for future episodes. Our sponsor today is First Majestic Silver, one of the premier silver mining companies in the world. Fantastic CEO, Mr. Keith Neumeyer. So I want to thank First Majestic Silver for being the sponsor of today's video. And last but not least, Independent Speculator newsletter. Absolutely fantastic. Help you make sense of everything that's happening in the world. Lobo worked with one of the most famous speculators in the world, Doug Casey, for many, many, many years. So absolutely fantastic newsletter. We'll link it right there down below in the description and pinned to the comments where you can go ahead and check it out and sign up. So that'll be linked as the top comment and in the description right there down below. You can go ahead and give that a listen if you enjoyed today's episode. So I want to thank you for coming on today, Lobo.
Oh, thank you for having me back on the show.
So I've only been doing this channel I started it right when the lockdowns started, actually. And there really wasn't any talk of inflation being a problem then. And when they were printing all this money and I would say to my mom or whomever, oh my gosh, this is going to be really bad. And everyone would be like, you're a little extreme here. And now flash forward not too long, not only is the Federal Reserve saying inflation is 7%, which if you would have told me that they would admit that, I wouldn't have believed you. But now you're seeing just how much it really is far above 7%. I mean, a lot of things might be 100% up. And then you combine that with supply chain issues. So we're in a peculiar economic environment, and you've been studying these themes for a very long time. It's been your profession. And I have to admit, I would have to imagine rather, it's a little peculiar to you seeing that it's really happening and the Fed's now admitting inflation 7%. So give me an idea what's going on in your head with what's happening, how it feels looking at it, and what do you think's coming next?
Sure. Well, sort of going to your initial comment about independent speculator, I named that for a reason. Our other mutual friend, Rick Rule, likes to say that in an investing world, you're either, especially as a speculative investor, you're either a contrarian or you're roadkill. And I really think that's true. Decades of experience bears that out. You have to be an independent thinker. You can't just drink the Kool-Aid that the powers that be pour all over you every time they say something. You talk about the big scope of things in history. You know, what government hasn't lied about debasing its currency over the last several thousand years? They all try to BS the public, and therefore you watch for Gresham's law for, bad money to chase out good or good money to chase out bad, depending on the turn of history there. So what's happening now, this is an important thing for people to understand and take away from this, is that every government has an incentive to be dishonest about what it's doing and what the impact of its policies will be. There is a lot of history, literally thousands of years of history, that says what happens when governments do things like what we've seen since 2020 and before. And the hard part here, and what makes this so much more a subject to debate, and it seems like it should be cut and dry, right? You triple the money supply, of course, prices go up. But sometimes you double the money supply and nothing happens. So, what's wrong? And how can somebody like Powell or Bernanke or whomever get away with saying, oh, money printing doesn't matter? Well, as Friedman observed, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, but it takes time. And the key point is that when you do have a fractional reserve banking system that we do now, like if in the old days you had just gold coins and silver coins, and you flooded your kingdom with more gold coins, of course, prices would go up very directly. But now we have funny little pieces of paper, electronic representations of little pieces of paper, and they can multiply throughout the economy. Banks can spend money into existence, lend money into existence. So you have this velocity of money concept, and that complicates things, and it turns everything, instead of a very direct and easy to see relationship, into sort of like this gummy thing of rubber bands where you push and pull on it, and the center of mass maybe doesn't react for a while. But boy, when it does, we see what we're seeing now. So, you look at mainstream financial media and they say, oh, 7% inflation. Nobody could have seen this coming. But I'm sure, Jake, that you had plenty of people on your show who, if they didn't put that specific number on it, they said high inflation like that is coming. And I'm sure I was one of those people. So yes, you could see it coming if you're independent, if you're not, part of the system or the powers that be. And it sounds like conspiracy stuff, but it really isn't. It's just thinking for yourself. And if you ever find yourself saying, this doesn't make sense, how can this be? You're probably being lied to. And that may sound a little extreme or whatever, but just look at the facts that you led off this conversation with. I mean, they all said, oh, it'll be transitory. And no, transitory didn't just mean not permanent, Jay Powell. It meant brief. And at first, it was just going to be the base effects, right? We'll see a little bit higher inflation because of the base effects. And then, well, no, we're changing the goalpost now. Delta came along. We're going to see more higher inflation because of Delta. And then now we're changing the goalposts again. It's the supply chain. And now the supply chains are starting to work out. Well, now it's Omicron. When somebody constantly moves the goalpost on you, don't trust them. There's nothing wrong with you, and you're not embracing a conspiracy if you can see that the other guys are cheating.
Yeah. And when I've looked at, obviously, my studies pale in comparison to someone like yourself, but when I've studied into currency crises that have occurred from reading the fantastic books about whether it was Zimbabwe or watching docu-series on Venezuela or Weimar Germany, you see a couple patterns other than just inflation, and one of them is supply chain issues. And I wonder what you make of the supply chain issues that are happening coupled with this inflation. To you, is this transitory? To you, is this the greedy meat companies? And where do you think it goes? Because that's really where I find myself more than anything, rather than what caused this. Is I'm wondering, especially as I told you, I got my daughter, my wife, we're wondering what's going to happen. So I just wonder, where does it go, and what do you make of it, and the parallels that you see between collapses of other societies?
All right, so I'll give you two answers, and bear with me a little bit, because I think this is really important. This may be the most important thing we talk about all day, Jake, because it affects not just your investments, which is what I focus on. And so when people say, where do you think it's going? I think, well, what's going to be the impact on the dollar? What's going to be the impact on commodities, my investments, that sort of thing. But you're also bringing up a really important point. The whole other side is just feeding my family. If things go crazy, if things actually break down in a serious way, a la Venezuela or Zimbabwe, and people like to say, oh, that can't happen here, that can't happen here. But all of history it's littered with the corpses of empires that thought that can't happen here. So there is no place that is sacred and chosen by God to be exempt from the laws of economics and psychology. All human beings are fallible. Groups of millions of human beings, no matter what fancy uniforms and hats they wear, are fallible. Nobody's exempt. So I think it's important that you bring this other aspect up. And I'm not going to sit here and say, okay, this is it. We're going into the Great Depression that Doug's been calling for all these years, or that the world's going to fall apart. We're going back to a Mad Max scenario. I'm not going to call for total disaster. I am going to say, though, that we are in uncharted waters. What was done after the crash of 2008 was uncharted, and it is dwarfed by what's been done since 2020. And so all these experts out there and all the powers that be saying we have it under control, we know what we're doing, we can solve inflation, no problem. They're talking out of their posteriors. That's just not credible when even Powell and people like that are saying we're in uncharted waters, but we still know what we're doing. I mean, it makes no sense. You're not wrong. You're not crazy if you listen to these things and think to yourself, that makes no sense. How can it be? Congratulate you for the independent thinking. And what I'm saying is there is potential for real trouble here. Maybe it's not, global collapse or Mad Max scale, but if the dollar stays in a high inflation environment and all these foreigners who have trusted the dollar as the least dirty shirt in the laundry hamper and all these other metaphors you keep hearing, if that changes, and they stop valuing the dollar so much, all those dollars outside the United States, which nobody really knows how much that is, but it's some large multiple of what's in the United States, if all that comes crashing back, then you can see something that's just a difficult, intractable problem turn into a real crisis. Now, how bad that crisis gets, I don't know. We could write a science fiction novel about that, but it would be bad. And to prepare for that, history's tried and true form of wealth protection and savings is bullion. Now, some people might say, well, Bitcoin's the gold 2.0. I'm actually not anti-Bitcoin, but Bitcoin wasn't around in the crash of 2008. Bitcoin doesn't have thousands of years of history. And I can tell you from personal experience that I have in my life experienced wealth preservation through bullion that literally kept my family fed when all else failed. So I'm a big believer in having some measure of bullion in your direct physical control, physical savings, an asset, like Doug Casey likes to say, it's the long for which there is no short. You just own it. You own value. You have that stashed away. And if you never use it, great. It's like insurance, fire insurance or life insurance. You don't want to use the insurance, but if you have to, you'll sure be glad to have it. So don't worry about the price of gold or silver. Don't worry about the markets in this context. We're talking about savings. We're talking about protecting your family and your potential, in my case, literally potential to eat the next day with physical savings that can't be printed, can't be fiated away. So that's the one thing. And I congratulate you for thinking about that. And by the way, I don't sell coins. I'm not in that business at all. I just think this is a principle. And it's something that helps you sleep at night. Even a modest allocation, a couple months worth of expenses in physical bullion really changes how well you rest at night. Now, I don't know if you want to pause with a question. The other side.
Well, my only thing that I would say to that too is, as someone that holds bullion myself for a similar philosophy, it's not an investment to me. It's just me having savings outside of the system. I don't know whether it's warranted or not, but one of my additional concerns with that is, given the complexity of the system today, and there's so many people, and we know so much of the components of economic collapses throughout history is the psychological component. And, there's that popular term that was coined, mass formation psychosis. What happens if that occurs with mass formation psychosis with currency and the bank bail-ins and shutdowns? And so for me, it's one of those types of philosophies as well. Is that something that you think is a concern, that we could have a bank bail-in, or do you think that's too far-fetched?
Oh, that's absolutely the case. I mean, even the United States, much vaunted rule of law in the United States, back in the Great Depression, closed down everybody's bank vaults when an FDR seized bullion, right? I mean, even the United States has literally seized the public's savings in bullion before. If you've never, and most of your audience probably knows this, has heard it, but if not, look it up. 1933, I think it was. It was an executive order, and they shut down the banks. You had to go in there with an officer to open up any bank savings box that you had, and if you had coins, U.S. bullion, they took them. The government was taking that back, and they gave you little pieces of paper instead. So it's not just it can happen; it has happened in the United States, and if that can happen in the United States, it can happen anywhere. which is why I said in your direct physical control. Savings in a bank, in my mind, adds an intermediary. It adds counterparty risk. So without giving away or saying anything that would invite anybody to come to my house and start knocking on walls to listen for hollow spaces, I think a reasonable amount of cautious intelligence can solve this problem. Some people talk about midnight gardening, other jokes like that. I think it's just prudent. It's prudent to have something that you physically have access to with no intermediary. And the beauty, silverbugs hate it when I say this, but beauty of gold is that it's so compact. And yes, in my mind, as monetary instruments, silver and gold are interchangeable. They're both monetary metals, for now at least. But gold is so much more compact; it's very convenient. You can carry a couple $1,000s in your pocket with your keys and your loose change going through airports around the world, and nobody will even ask you. They'll just see coins in your pocket. It's very very convenient, and you can literally put $1 million in a briefcase right now. A heavy briefcase, make it a strong briefcase. But do you see what I'm saying? It's a very convenient way to pack some value away in case of ultimate need. Now, again, this may sound like crazy conspiracy stuff. You're talking about the end of the world, man. No, I'm not. I mean, bank bail-ins, those are on the table now, particularly in Europe. That is one of the emergency measures that is actively being discussed. So I don't think I'm crazy. I think the world is crazy, and it's best to prepare yourself for crazy actions by desperate governments. That's reasonable.
Now, I diverted you there for a moment just because I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on that. But you were saying you had 2 points. What was the other point there?
Well, the other one is investment implications. How am I playing this? How am I hoping to profit and benefit from this? And I think that's a good thing to do. I personally am a big believer in Adam Smith's invisible hand. I think I do good while doing well, as long as I'm an honest participant in the market. I create value and I exchange that with others in exchange for money.
Could you explain to me what the invisible hand is, Lobo?
Sure. The seminal book that really kicked off the modern discipline of economics as separate from politics or psychology or earlier branches of science, in my view, was Adam Smith's book, The Wealth of Nations. Interestingly enough, if memory serves, published in 1776 or thereabouts. Nice coincidence. But these ideas were part of the Great Enlightenment, part of the environment that existed when the United States was founded. And it's one reason why it's so different from other American countries up and down the Americas, which were founded in decades or centuries later when the ideas of socialism were in the ascendancy. So anyway, Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, very famous book. You can look it up. I think Gutenberg Press has it for free if you like. And one of the key concepts was what he called the invisible hand. And he said, basically, it's not because cattlemen in Texas love snotty New Yorkers that they get up at 5 a.m. and take care of their cows and make sure they're healthy. It's because they will make money taking care of the cows and selling fatter, healthier cows and getting more meat to deliver to the market, which the New Yorkers are happy to pay for. And if you look at the balance of voluntary transactions in the marketplace, each side thinks it benefits. The New Yorker can't keep a cow in his backyard. The guy in Texas values the money for the steak more than the cow. He doesn't need 100 cows. And everybody wins. And Adam Smith said it was like, you can imagine the hand of God, if you will, an invisible hand reaching down and organizing things for the maximum benefit for society without the government making a law or some cow expert telling everybody in the world how many cows to grow. This invisible hand seemed to guide things for the benefit of everybody. And that's basically the power of the marketplace, the price system in the marketplace. I think that is a good thing. I think being a capitalist, being a participant in the market actually does good for the world. And accumulating capital so you can do something like, I don't know, build reusable rockets, whether anybody wants to invest in that or not, just do it. I think that's a good thing. You don't ask for permission. You don't need a committee approval. If you have the capital to do something, you just do it. And so anyway, this is a side of a side road, but what I'm saying is there is actually an ethical case here for getting rich, as long as you do it honestly. right? Is if you're a thief, if you're cheating people, or you're using the government mechanisms to increase your wealth at other people's expense, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about creating value and trading it on the marketplace. Everybody benefits from that, and it lifts the entire world out of poverty. That's the story of the last couple hundred years.
What do you make of the attack on capitalism? And before you answer that, I would argue we don't really actually live in a capitalist system. So when people point to the problems or wealth disparities or whatnot, I would call this a fiat capitalist system. It's a fake one. It's not a true one. And I wonder, what do you make of that? Because, for example, Akon, I don't know if you recall Akon, a very, very, very famous pop and rap singer when I was growing up, who became incredibly wealthy, and he's provided more solar and renewable energies, clean water to Africa than governments have. And he's done that two ways. One, because he became a successful capitalist, and two, because he built a level of fame and brand that allowed more resources to come to him. So I think it's a perfect example of that. And one of my concerns is that throughout history, whenever these regimes begin to take more control, they blame capitalism for it. And I wonder, what do you make of that? And
Right.
yeah, it's a concern. It's
I
a genuine
understand.
concern.
We'll come back to the investment. I understand, and I think there's a very real threat of that happening now. You see it already in the United States with this blaming of the evil corporations for inflation. Like, clearly farmers and ranchers, they conspired with fertilizer diggers in Canada and people in China and India and all around the world to raise food prices. Yeah, there was this grand conspiracy. So those evil farmers and ranchers are responsible for higher food prices. Like, where do these people come from? Or more, I know where they're coming from. Why do people believe this? And now there's really a drumbeat now for it's these evil corporations. They're responsible for inflation. Can't have anything to do with government policy. Can't have anything to do with $8 trillion more in government debt over the last couple of years in response to the pandemic, and the Fed doubling its balance sheet. No, that can't have anything to do with inflation. It's those evil corporations. Just today, or was it yesterday, I saw that Starbucks is raising their prices. And it's not because they're an evil corporation, it's because their input costs are higher. And you know what? How about people accepting higher wages? People say, oh, that's great. Wage increases are good. The working man's getting their fair share or more of their due. But you know what? That's a cost too. Why aren't they taking the bullet and saying, you know what, I'm just going to work for less because I'm going to fight inflation? No, it's good for individuals to take what they can, to fight inflation, but it's bad for corporations to adjust for their input costs. I think this is hypocrisy. I think it's self-serving on the part of politicians who pander to the left and to socialistic sentiments, which have been promulgated by our education system for generations now. So it's sort of the lowest common denominator out there. It's how you get elected. You promise free goodies. You make somebody else the bad guy. Shift the blame. So I think this is a serious threat now, but we're getting off the side of the side road here. We were talking about Adam Smith's invisible hand. We're talking about the good that you can do as a capitalist. Actually, one thing, here's something that'll maybe bend your audience's mind. I think using the word capitalism is kind of unfortunate. It was actually Marx that coined that term. And it's really, capital is important. But as you can see from the fall of huge corporations, like say IBM, which was thought to be, the one computer company that, like the one ring of Sauron, would consume them all in the end. And now it's a minor player compared to all these other companies. If the customer no longer wants what even the biggest company has to sell, that company has to adapt to the customer. So it's not in the market system. It's not actually the capitalist who's the boss. To make his or her money, the capitalist has to give the largest number of people possible what they want. The people are actually the boss. It's actually quite democratic. So a better word would actually be consumerism. Now, consumerism is an evil word today. That's bad. It's crass, commercial, nasty stuff. But in terms of, like, if you contrast it with capitalism, consumerism actually puts the real boss at the top of the system. And what I'm saying in your story about this musical entrepreneur, doing all kinds of good in Africa, it's an example, I think, of the positive, moral, ethical good that honest participation in the marketplace delivers for the world. The world is better off for this kind of activity.
Now, you said a word or a phrase that I really agree with. I think in our world, one of the more noble things that you can do is to honestly get rich. And even if we get rid of the word get rich, because maybe some people think that it might be unobtainable for them, and maybe they're just looking to maintain their standard of living. Let's take a step back and look at the global economy today. We've had fears of a stock market crash again, and there was a sell off for a while, and it's kind of rebounded. My personal opinion is that it's not going to crash now, and that since they can't have a natural correction, they almost have to force a correction to slow things down for a little while. And I wondered, what's your thought on this correction? Am I off base and on base? And more importantly, what are the things to look out for right now if you are an independent speculator and you are looking to improve your or maintain even your standard of living? What are the things that you're looking at? I know a lot of the focus that independent speculator has is on commodities and mining stocks. Where do they fall into this overarching theme we're having here with inflation combined with a fear of a market crash? How does that all blend together?
Yeah, I've got to tell you, Jake, I'm skeptical that they'll deliberately cause a crash that has a reverse wealth effect problem, just all kinds of ramifications. Things can spin out of control. I'm not sure they would want to bring that on. Now, it may happen whether they want it or not, because on the other hand, people feel the inflation and they vote. And so they have to appear to do something. It's that old thing, if you're in government, you have to do something, or at least blame somebody, but you have to do something. So they have to at least appear to do something. But there's also the issue of the national debt just got to 30 trillion. We knew it was headed that way, but it's officially today, you and I speak, Jake, just hit $30 trillion. And the interest on that, if interest rates go up, is unmanageable. I mean, the amount of money printing that was done in response to the COVID crisis is that scale of money printing you'd have to do just to keep up with the national debt if interest rates normalized. So you're stuck between this rock and the hard place where, on the one hand, you need to appear to fight inflation, at least appear to. You need to try to normalize. But if you do, economic situation and the government's finances become unmanageable, and let alone private sector debt, and that tightening, does cost jobs, and the voters feel that too. The voters are going to scream about high inflation, but they're going to scream about the lost jobs if they do something about inflation. So I have said in a number of interviews that this is why I think this is the year. And you know me, I'm not one for making these big, bold predictions, but I do think the evidence suggests that this is the year the rock and the hard place come together on the Fed. And that could easily produce a market crash this year. It's not a prediction. That is a probabilistic statement that if I'm right about, the Fed being stuck here, and it's damned if it does and damned if it doesn't, or it will make a policy error or it will make a policy error, that could trigger this crash whether they want or not. Investment implications? Do we want to go there yet?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go.
Okay. I am not selling everything because it might crash. It might. I don't know. All these guys who go on YouTube and they say, oh, the crash is coming in 3 weeks. Oh, head for the hills. Lock the door in your bunker. I mean, it's very dangerous if people listen to gurus who know the future. Nobody knows the future. I'm making a probabilistic statement. I am increasing the cash portion of my portfolio as fast as I can. Now, in case I'm wrong, I'm also not selling anything that I want to own. I'm not just getting out and saying, oh, I'll buy in cheaper later. Because what if the market takes off? What if Build Back Better comes back? Or what if, what if the money printing that's already been done keeps things going crazy this year regardless, right? So no, I'm not selling everything and getting out. I'm just saying that I want to have as big a war chest I can in case we do get this crash. Meanwhile, more specifically, I am willing to buy great gold and silver stocks now because I think monetary metals have the potential to do really well if that crash happens. I'm more reluctant to get into industrial metals and broader commodities until we see which way the chips fall here. Because obviously, if there's a crash or we get into real stagflation where you have recession and inflation at the same time, that would be negative for copper and other industrial metals. So I'm holding off on that. I'm willing to buy great gold and silver specs now. I'm holding off industrial metals. I'm building cash ahead of a crash. And then the other one that's sort of off by itself is the unloved stepchild of uranium. And I think, we've talked about it before. Your audience may be tired of hearing about uranium, but I'm pretty sure that you and I have mentioned before, Jake, that it's been the entire bull market that started 5 years ago in uranium. This upward trend has been 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We're in a step back right now that has a lot of people saying, oh, it's over, it's done, they hate uranium. It's recent fair weather friends that got all excited in the big breakout last year. Many of those people are just dumping uranium and they're getting out. I think that's a big mistake, and I think it's a big opportunity for anybody that missed uranium last year. I'm happy to elaborate on any of these themes if you like.
Yeah, let's talk about that because, we could talk endlessly about what could happen and the problems that might occur. And one thing that I have made a New Year's resolution is to focus on the things that I can control for a lot of reasons. And one of them is primarily the fact that now that I have a family, one, it doesn't do me any mental and emotional energy good to just circle around the problems. And two, I do realize that there is opportunities. And one of those opportunities to me at the forefront is uranium. And I wonder how you believe it fares in regards to, you've said that you're unsure about commodities and industrial metals because you don't know what might occur. And I wonder, where does uranium fall into that camp for you, especially given that even if we have, let's say that we had one of these scenarios that, these people go out and they say, we're headed into the apocalypse. One of the issues with that thesis regards to uranium, as far as I can tell, is that you still need power and we still need it nonetheless. And so I wonder, how does it fit into your overall equation and what are your expectations for it?
Right. That's why I called it this unloved stepchild all by itself. As an industrial metal, you would think, well, why not lump it in with the other? Or as an energy commodity, why not lump it in with oil? And if there is an economic headwind, a reversal or a downturn even, then oil and energy prices would typically fall. That's a well tried and true pattern. And the honest answer is that at least initially or in the short term, that probably would happen. If there's a big market correction, uranium prices, the spot may not move directly. It might, but the stocks would certainly take it on the chin. We see that all the time. It's crazy. You see days when uranium spot price is up and the stocks are down because stocks in general are down. Now, that doesn't mean that uranium stocks ignore uranium prices. Over the course of 2021, uranium prices were up and the stocks were overall up. But in the short-term volatility, you see that just general market, ups and downs affect the stocks a lot. And if the energy sector as a whole is turning down, I do think that would be a headwind short-term for uranium. But here's why that I think of this as separate and not just any other industrial commodity or mineral. Unlike other commodities, copper or tin, many things right now that are very, very elevated prices, historically elevated prices. I think they can go higher because of the money printing, but you can't call $4 copper cheap compared to 70-cent copper and that sort of thing. Whereas uranium is still at a price that most miners can't mine profitably. So That's different. It's different from just about everything else. At $88 oil, of course, everybody can make money. Almost everybody can make money pumping oil at that price. And like I say, $4 copper, $1.60 zinc. I mean, that's an incredible price for zinc. Uranium in the low 40s. That Kazakhstan and a couple other very low cost mines can produce at those prices, but that's not enough to meet global demand. Global demand has already exceeded mine supply for years. And we're still at a price, despite the 5-year price increase that we talked about earlier, the 2 steps forward, the 1 step back, uranium prices are still below the average cost of production out there in the world. That makes it unique. I think that insulates it to a significant degree, apart from the short term, from the overall macro trends. Because as you say, people aren't just going to turn off the lights, especially baseload power that uranium provides, the sort of thing that keeps the heart of a city running, your hospitals, your airports, your vital infrastructure. That's where you really want a nuclear power plant that always runs, not turbines from a windmill or something like that, or even run a river that can have a bad year and run dry. It's one of those things like, whatever happens to the global economy, people are going to eat. Whatever happens to the global economy, people are going to want the lights to come on. They may drive less, they may produce less of aluminum or something that consumes a lot of electricity, but they're still going to want the lights to come on. And in my view, this dovetails really perfectly with the multi-year shortfall in mine supply in uranium, plus the new entrants in the uranium market last year, hoovering up all the cheap pounds on the market. Those are gone. And that sets the table for higher prices going forward. And I think the utilities, the actual consumers of uranium, not the speculators on the market, but the consumers, I think they see that. I think we're going to see new long-term contracts signed with the miners this year, by the end of this year. And I think those will be at substantially higher prices than we've seen in the past. And that will put a floor under uranium prices. So I'm extremely bullish on this. And it is different from other speculations out there because, you've got the technicals and the fundamentals and the macro situation really all lining up here.
Yeah, so we'll have the link to Independent Speculator where Lobo breaks all of this down in a lot more detail. Obviously, Lobo is one of the most experienced mining investors and speculators that's out there. So we'll link that right there down below in the description and pin to the comments. And as we kind of go full circle here, what are the most important things that you are watching from a very simplified level?
The DXY, absolutely. It's really come front and center for just about everything. When I watch the markets on a daily basis, the DXY is the dollar basket, the dollar currency exchange. It's the most quoted figure for the so-called forex price of the dollar. Changes there are impacting all kinds of things. Gold is reacting to it directly instead of interest rates. So that's one. I think it will be really interesting to see, the employment statistics, the sort of economic statistics before the Fed's next decision. And then probably, this is a little bit farther, but still quite near term, a critical moment, perhaps a historic moment, will happen in March when we see what the Fed does. The markets are pricing in with absolute certainty that the Fed will raise interest rates in March. And if they don't, if they surprise the markets in any way, I think we could see real fireworks. And I think people need to expect higher volatility. I do think the Fed is damned if they do and damned if they don't. Watching what happens to the dollar and the economic news before then. And by the way, yes, I do understand that the world is larger than the United States. And the dollar is not the only currency in the world. But I focus on commodities. There are other investments. Don't ask me which is the best DeFi to invest in. That's not me. I'm a metals and mining due diligence guy. That's what I do. I evaluate mining companies and exploration companies. So I look in that, and commodities are priced in dollars. So I have to focus on what happens to the dollar and its impact on my area of focus.
Now, for a long time, there's been a conversation that has been dismissed as a conspiracy theory that the almighty dollar, could lose not only a standing on the global stage, but maybe more significantly for us everyday individuals, that it could, rapidly continue its devaluation of its purchasing power. Whereas there's another side that says that, we may have a catastrophic scenario where the opposite happens. Where do you fall in the camp of what you believe the future of the dollar is?
I've actually met Brent Johnson, the dollar milkshake guy. He's a nice guy. We sat together on an airplane and debated something along these lines the entire trip. And I understand the cleanest, least dirty shirt in the hamper, or the prettiest mare at the glue factory, those kind of metaphors. So I understand the pro-dollar argument. And if the rest of the world is going to hell in a handbasket faster than the United States, sure, the dollar could rise in foreign exchange. So the DXY could make the dollar look very strong. But the main answer really is to keep your eye on the ball. If you have one fiat currency and it seems to be doing well compared to other fiat currencies, you're looking at fiat currencies. They're all meaningless abstractions. And how well one does compared to the other doesn't tell you a lot about the real world. So if they're all falling, they're all crashing, the fact that the dollar looks stronger compared to the others doesn't matter when you go to the supermarket and everything's more expensive. So my view is that this issue with looking at the dollar's strength by comparing it to other fiat currencies is a huge mistake that benefits the powers that be. A real price metric for the dollar is the price of gold. I actually refer to the price of gold as the gold-dollar exchange ratio. And I think that's a useful concept to keep in mind. You can also look at the oil-dollar exchange ratio, or when you go shopping, keep that. I guess a key takeaway here, Jake, is look at the real world. Forget what all the experts and authorities are telling you. It's not a conspiracy. Don't believe what I'm saying either. Look at your reality. And if your reality is that things are getting more expensive, that's telling you something directly, not from me, not from Powell, not from anybody else. And my view is that however they massage this or message this, in what we're looking at going forward, it's not a conspiracy theory to weight your investments and weight your savings towards things that are real. And that can include bullion, it can include real estate. There are a lot of things that are physically real and valuable that one can go long to hedge against this potential for a big. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory at all. It's more like it's a probability that has been chicken littled for so long that the dollar's going to crash, that people just can't take it seriously. But you know what? For decades, anybody with any economic sense said the Soviet Union would crash, and nobody took it seriously until it happened. So don't get complacent. Don't believe that it can't happen to the dollar. Nothing lasts forever. And in my view, focusing on real assets is, at the very least, a way to harden your portfolio that everybody should consider, if not a way to actually profit from what might be ahead.
Okay, so as we wrap up here, let me end with a non-investment question in conclusion. Outside of the strategies laid out in independent speculator, outside of the things that you've discussed that you're looking for and opportunities that you see, what do you think is the most important philosophy or mindset to excel in these turbulent times?
That's interesting that you bring it up. I was just thinking about this a couple of days ago, preparing for an investment 101 session that I did for Liberty International. I was thinking about recommended books and things, and and I was like, what's the most useful one? Is it is it Doug Casey's book? Is it Ben Graham's Intelligent Investor? I love those books. But what came to the top of my mind was actually an audio series done by Earl Nightingale back in the day called Lead the Field. I'm not sure if this is available for free online, but if it's not,
yeah,
it'd be worth paying for.
Yeah, it's available for free.
I think it's interesting to me that a number of very successful people I know listened to Earl Nightingale's Lead the Field talks and were profoundly influenced by them. I was profoundly influenced by that. And it's kind of dismissed as being self-help, wishy-washy kind of stuff. But he basically outlines a very sound set of core principles for how to be successful in our world, given the human animal out there, human psychology out there, what the world is like. And and there's other related materials. I actually think some of Brian Tracy's self-help stuff, I mean, it sounds so, squishy, self-help stuff, whatever. But proper time management, just getting things right between your ears is vital to how you're going to do in the marketplace or in life. And honestly, Jake, the competition is so crappy. Like, just trying it all applies the 80-20 rule. You'll do, if you try 20% harder, you'll do better than 80% of the people, because most people just don't even try. So thinking about how to excel, In Search of Excellence, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, even Wayne Dyer's Your Erroneous Zones, this sounds like, cheesy self-help stuff, Think and Grow Rich, but there are valid principles in here that I think really do separate successful people from the masses. And anybody can learn these things and apply them in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic, way to end. There's that quote by Jim Rohn, and he says, "Work hard on your job and you'll make a living. Work hard on yourself and you'll make a fortune." And in today's world, whether it's people that are aware of the, dare I call it, corruption of the global economic system, or it's people that are gaslighted by politicians, I see a common thread in that people are looking for a reason to justify the less than ideal circumstances of their life. And that's why my New Year's resolution is to control the things that I can control, because I've decided that regardless of what happens, I'm going to find a way to excel. And unfortunately, the temptation of giving away your power, whether it's your power to the corruption of the Federal Reserve, or it's your power to the corporations, or it's your power to the greedy capitalists, or it's your giving away your power to another country or another race or whatever. It's so prevalent today that, as you suggested, there really isn't much competition. I was rewatching the movie Idiocracy just the other day, and I was getting a real laugh out of it. And it does present an opportunity. And as you suggested, look, the opportunities are always going to be there, and it's very important to maintain keep our eye on the prize, right?
Yeah. I've got a scoot, so let me just throw in this last thought on these slides, because it's a beautiful thing. I think this is really important. If you are really good at making excuses and casting blame, if that's your expertise, making excuses, what you'll have in the end of the day is a bunch of excuses, not success. As Brian Tracy likes to say, I don't know where he got it, but he likes to say, if it's to be, it's up to me. And that would be a great way to summarize what we're talking about with investment speculation, hardening your portfolio, moving ahead in life, all these things. If it's to be, it's up to me. Stop blaming other people. Stop making excuses. And this applies to libertarians too. We love to blame the government. Oh, I'd be rich if it wasn't the government's rules, and I'm too ethical to make money in this corrupt system, and so on. Stop making excuses. Participate successfully in the marketplace. And if it's to be, it's up to me.
So if you're looking for a strategy to help you out with that, if that rings true to you, but you're saying, well, where do I begin? What do I do? What can I control? I highly recommend you head over to Independent Speculator, consider signing up for the newsletter. In the least, give it a look, right? Because I think there's a lot of things that ring true here, but then people may say, well, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I don't have a strategy. And that's why I recommend, and why Rick Rule talks so much about on my channel, is investing in yourself. So we'll link Independent Speculator in the description and pin to the comments right there down below, where you go ahead and sign up. Make sure you smash the like button on this video. Give us a comment right there down below. Let us know what your 2022 New Year's resolution is. Let us know what you think about today's episode. We want to thank Lobo for coming on here today, and looking forward to navigating these confusing and interesting times with you, my friend.
You too, Jake. Take care.